Hello, welcome. If you're wondering why I look like Millie Bobby Brown from season 1 of Stranger Things, I gave myself a quarantine haircut. It is what it is. It was going gray anyway. I was balding. It had to go. So, probably for the best. Today, I'm going to talk about my journey of going from business school to learning how to code. And when I say coding, I know it's a broad definition, so specifically what I'm talking about here is web development, meaning any of the platforms you see on the web today, things like Facebook, things like Twitter, anything that can be delivered over a web browser like Chrome. Before I start the video, I think there's a couple important things that I need to note. I went to business school in college. I didn't have a technical major. However, I did take a few CS classes throughout the course of college. That being said, my websites look like this. So clearly I was really not advanced at all at that point in time. So basically beginner level, if you're starting out as a beginner, that's pretty much where I was coming out of school. And I had this idea all throughout school of building this startup on a web platform, and unfortunately had none of the technical skills to do so. And so I set about on this journey of learning how to do it myself. If you're interested in what I've been working on, I've linked it in the bio below if you want to check it out. The second is along those lines as well. I think it's really important to have a project or something that you are looking to build specifically. As you go through this process, it'll help you immensely in terms of staying motivated, and it takes you a lot deeper than the classes would when you have something on your own that you're trying to debug, and you can't as easily say, I don't understand this concept, and moving on. And so I think that having a project going into your learning journey will help a lot in terms of gaining a deeper understanding of what you're doing. The third thing I want to talk about is, I've mentioned it before, specifically what I'll be talking about today is web development. This is specifically things that live in browsers. They're not apps that you would download from the App Store or from the Google Play Store. If you came here to learn how to code in Python, this is probably not the right place for you. However, I do think that web development is a great foundation for anything that involves coding, any coding languages. It gives you a really strong foundation in terms of understanding how the web works, understanding how certain languages work and interact with each other. There are tools out there today like Wix and Squarespace that will build websites for you. However, the functionality is limited, and there's not really an ability with these platforms to include databases or do some of the more complex things like the Facebooks and the Amazons do on their web platforms. So after all of that, let's get started. First course that I took was on Coursera, and Coursera is the first tool I'm going to talk about. I think it's a great tool because you have the option to audit classes for free, which is great because you can kind of try certain classes, and if you don't like them, there's no issue with moving to the other classes or trying other classes. You didn't pay any money for it. I've linked all the courses that I took, the specific links in the description, so as you go through this, you can see specifically what I took on these learning materials. Another thing to mention is I'm not sponsored by any of the tools that I'll be talking about, mainly because I have literally like 3 subscribers on YouTube and no one wants to pay me to do any of that. And so these are just truly the tools that I found to be best for learning. Another thing with Coursera is it is generally published by universities and professors, meaning that you'll get that sort of college experience in the college class foundation around it, which I think is really neat. The first course I took is Website Basics. It was a class from Johns Hopkins. This is a really great review if you have done things like this before, like me, and your knowledge is still pretty limited and your websites look like garbage. And if you have not done this before, it's a good place to start. Secondly, I took a specialization, is what it's called, on Coursera, and the specialization was full stack web development. So this takes you more from the basics of making a website to actually having a server behind it and having a database that it pulls data from. And this took me about 2 to 3 months-ish. I think I skipped over courses 4 or 5, something like that, because it dealt specifically with mobile app development, which was something I am not interested in at this time. But if you are interested in things like that, that option is there for you as well. So after I completed the specialization course on full stack web development, I was ready to go off on my own. You'll learn that after you're sort of on your own, the absolute best tools and your best friends are Google and Stack Overflow. And you're gonna have a ton of questions about things that weren't mentioned in the courses. But the good news is that a lot of people do stuff like this, and someone has probably had that question before, and it's pretty easy to find an answer to what you're looking for. So there's a great community surrounding web development and the tools specifically that I talk about here today. So I think that the combination of these two courses is really, really great if this is something that you're looking to do and kind of do on your own. And then after that, around the same time that I was finishing the full stack web development course, I started taking AWS courses, and this was sort of a personal interest of mine. And then I realized later that it's really important that just because you make a website doesn't mean anyone can see it, because it'll just be on your computer. And so it's important to publish it somewhere, host it in a server somewhere. There's a lot of different options for that, but AWS is by far the largest, and I figured it would be a great place to start to understand some things with cloud computing and hosting my website somewhere. So I started with AWS around month 3. I took courses specifically geared toward the basics of AWS, as well as the Certified Solutions Architect certificate. This was just a personal goal of mine. It's not at all a requirement. You do have to pay money to get the certificate. I think having a certificate that you're striving toward is really helpful in terms of staying on track with your learning and making sure you understand the material. There are 2 places primarily that I learned AWS from. The first just being AWS Learning, their site. They have a lot of great material on learning the different tools on their website. Really nice videos. The second tool I use for that is called a Cloud Guru. Their focus is more on the specific exams for the AWS certifications. If that's something that you're not interested in, you can probably skip that, but it's another great place to get materials surrounding AWS. I think there's a month free trial, which I did, and I think I finished the whole course in a month because I didn't want to pay anything for it. And then around month 5, I actually ended up getting my Certified Solutions Architect certification on AWS. And then after, I think, another month of developing on my own was when I actually went through the process of taking my website and hosting it on AWS. So I guess big takeaways from this. The 3 tools that I used specifically are Coursera, the AWS learning site, and a Cloud Guru. I have linked, like I said, all the specific classes that I took below in my description if you want to check those out for yourself. The tools specifically that I ended up using were Angular as my framework for the actual website. I found Angular pretty easy to use, and it's supported by Google, so there's a lot of support out there. I initially did a class with Ruby on Rails, if that's something you look at, but I didn't quite like that as much as Angular. And the database that I use specifically is MongoDB. So when you talk about the whole, package of web development, what it's called technically is a mean stack, meaning that MongoDB is your database, that's the M. Express is your middleware, so that's what stands between your front end and your database, it's your back end. The A stands for Angular, which is the overall package for the front end and the framework for that. And then N stands for Node, which is a package manager. Mean is a pretty popular framework. Again, when you go with the more popular frameworks, it's easier to find support and find answers to your questions. And then in the cloud, I use specifically AWS, and I use EC2 to host my website. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope this was helpful to some of you. Again, these are just tools that are my personal preference and things that help me in my journey to building a web application. And again, that's linked below if you want to check it out. Feel free to roast my work if you want to. And then also all the classes that I took are linked below as well. Hope this was helpful, and best of luck in building your website.